Chapter 24. Fallout. Mrs. Hayes' initial reaction was shock. After all, her son had been beaten up in a pet cemetery. It was not the kind of news a mother hears every day. So she freaked. Eric couldn't blame her. He did look like a mess. Before they reached Eric's house, Mary had helped him clean up in the bathroom at McDonald's. She went right into the men's room with him, just locked the door and went to work, dabbing and rinsing and making a fuss. Eric's face was bruised and swollen around the eyes and cheek. His lower lip was split. His body was sore, stiff, and bone-tired. Nothing that 2 Advils every 4 hours, with a full weekend of rest, couldn't cure. His body would recover. Mrs. Hayes asked a million questions, and when she didn't like the answers, she picked up the phone and started dialing. Eric, for his part, downplayed everything. At first, he hoped to claim it was all a football injury, but after he looked at his face in the mirror, he knew that story wouldn't fly. So he spooned out a watered-down version of the truth. It wasn't that big of a deal, just a misunderstanding, and so on and so forth. But his mother took everything super seriously. She wanted names. She wanted facts. She was like one of those detectives on Law and Order. She even asked, "Checkers' gravesite? Why is Nixon's dog buried in Bellport?" Mrs. Hayes was not the type of person to let this kind of thing fade into the background, as Eric had hoped. She talked on the phone with school counselors, teachers, and the principal. She turned everything into a big deal. For Eric, that was the worst part of it. Being at the center of all that hand-wringing, he just wanted it to go away. At the same time, a part of him was relieved. He was glad that the school knew, that eyes had been opened, that this thing, supposedly, wouldn't happen again. Eric managed to keep David Hallenbach's name out of it. He had to tell about the other guys, Cody, Griffin, Drew, Will, and Sinjay. Maybe not telling the whole truth was a mistake. Maybe he should have said something about Hallenbach. But some instinct told Eric to leave it alone. He wouldn't have said anything about Mary either, except she insisted on waiting with Eric until his mother came home from work. That was the first thing Eric said, after his mother exclaimed, "Eric, oh my God, what happened?" He gestured feebly with his hand and said, "Mom, this is Mary O'Malley." It wasn't really a great time for introductions, but what are you going to do? It was not a perfect world, as Eric had resoundingly discovered. The dogs, Eric suddenly remembered. He'd forgotten all about his dog-walking duties. Mary volunteered to do it. Eric wasn't sure. "No," Mrs. Hayes cut in. "I'll take care of the dogs." "Then I'll wait here with Eric," Mary said. And there wasn't a trace of question in her voice. She wasn't asking permission. "Fine," Mrs. Hayes relented. "I'll be back soon. There's some ice cream in the freezer." Eric was sullen and embarrassed to be alone with Mary, and in such sorry shape. He was relieved when his mother returned and Mary left. But she stopped by the next day to drop off a video, she said. It was The School of Rock, starring Jack Black. Eric had seen the movie a few times already. "I pledge allegiance to the band of Mr. Schneebly." But it was the thought that counted, and to Eric, it counted a lot. Seeing Mary was good, though, because now, more than ever, he felt cut off and alone. Eric hated that first day back at school on Monday. Everyone knew about the fight. There was no secrets in 7th grade. Plus, his face looked like a bruised peach. He wanted to stay home an extra day, but his mother wouldn't allow it. She was all about getting back on that horse and blah, blah, blah. There was no arguing with her. Walking the halls, sitting in classrooms, from the way kids looked at him, you'd think that his hair had turned into live snakes. He was, as Sophie Cerrone said in French class, le freak du jour. She was kidding, Eric hoped. Mr. Floyd, the counselor, summoned Eric to a meeting in his office. Eric was instructed to bring his lunch. The invitation came as a relief, since it allowed Eric to put off another day for the discomfiture of the cafeteria. Mr. Floyd rose and greeted Eric when he entered the office. He inquired how Eric was feeling, gestured to a chair. All very gracious and smooth. Eric glanced around the room. In addition to the usual setup of a big desk and a high-backed swivel chair, Mr. Floyd's office included a round conference table to facilitate meaningful dialogue, no doubt. It was here where Eric now sat. Nothing much happened at first. Mr. Floyd busied himself with a folder stuffed with a notepad and papers. So Eric tore into his sandwich, ham and Swiss, on rye, with just a whisper of mustard. Not bad. There was a knock on the door behind Eric. Mr. Floyd looked up and said, "Thank you for joining us, Cody. Please take a seat." Eric's heart sputtered. Cody looked glum and distrustful. He set down his lunch tray and took a seat at the table as far from Mr. Floyd and Eric as mathematically possible, so that the three participants now represented the points of a perfect triangle. "I realize this must feel awkward for you," Mr. Floyd began, "but I felt it was important to bring you boys together to discuss what happened after school on Friday." Mr. Floyd ran a hand over his goatee and pursed his lips. "I understand punches were thrown." Cody and Eric exchanged weary glances. Neither said a word. "Because it was off school grounds," Mr. Floyd continued as he looked from boy to boy, "there isn't much I can do in terms of punishment. But I do want you to know that you are on my radar." He looked directly at Cody. "Do you know what that means?" "That you'll be watching us?" "Exactly right," Mr. Floyd answered. "I want your agreement right now. This ends here." He tapped his finger on the desk along with each word. "This tap ends tap here tap. Do you understand?" Cody glanced at Eric, nodded. "Eric?" Mr. Floyd asked. "It's not up to me," Eric said. "I didn't start it in the first place." "You did so," Cody retorted. "I just finished it." Eric looked away, muttering soundlessly. "Is there something you want to say, Eric?" Mr. Floyd asked. "Not really." "I mean, this is your chance," Mr. Floyd urged. "I'm not asking you boys to kiss and make up." Cody and Eric both instantly frowned and rolled their eyes. "But this is a chance to clear the air in a safe, private environment." Cody looked like he may say something, as if he was forming the sentence in his head, but it was Eric who spoke first. "Look, I should have never said that about you. It's not how I want to act. I'm not proud of it. I'm sorry." Cody swallowed, reached for a glass of water. "I got so mad when I heard it," he confessed. "I've been trying to control my temper. You know that, Mr. Floyd. I'm sick of getting in trouble. But the guys kept after me. They kept getting in my face saying, 'Are you going to let him get away with it?'" "The guys," Mr. Floyd interjected, meaning Griffin Conley. Cody instantly realized his mistake. "Griffin didn't do anything," Cody corrected himself. "It was all on me. I threw the punches." Eric raised a finger, and I caught them. It was funny. Everyone chuckled, even Mr. Floyd. "Did Griffin encourage you to fight?" the counselor asked Cody. Cody looked across the table at Eric, and then back to Mr. Floyd. His face was a blank stare. Nobody can make me do something I don't want to do," he said. "Yes, I understand, Cody, but," Eric interrupted the counselor. "We're okay, Mr. Floyd. If Cody says this is over, then it's over. We both made mistakes." He reached out a hand, and Cody took it. "Truce," they said. "Listen to me, Cody," Mr. Floyd said. "I'll be speaking with your parents. I'm going to let them know what we've talked about, and I promise you, I'll be talking to Mr. Conley, too. This kind of behavior is unacceptable. We won't tolerate it in this school. There will be consequences." When the boys left the office, they headed to their lockers. Fifth period was almost over. When Cody stopped at the water fountain, Eric paused there, too. "He used you. You know that, don't you?" Cody looked up, eyes searching. "What happened between you and me, that was a fair fight. It was between us, and us only. I fight my own battles." "Good," Eric replied. Or in my case, not so good. Cody grinned. "Yeah, and, listen. It was wrong what Hallenbach did out there. He's a jerk. I didn't see him go after you until—" "I'll be all right," Eric interrupted. "I can handle David Hallenbach. He's not my main problem." Cody stood motionless, then nodded slowly. "I hear what you're saying." The bell rang, and the hallway flooded with students. Cody and Eric went their separate ways. Both somehow felt a little better about things.